She was writing on her notebook the things he explained to her when he reached out and grabbed her hand. His thumb moved up and down while he spoke to her, and to Sarah, it felt like burning. What the Dude, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another storytime video. If you guys are new, I read stories and get them illustrated here on the channel. I try to pick stories that are interesting and have something to take away at the end. So if you guys are new, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. And without further ado, let's begin. Sarah was looking down at her cell phone under her desk when Mr. Anderson was introduced to the class by the principal. She knew she was risking getting in trouble, but there were only a few lines left until the end of the chapter that she was reading. She decided it was worth the risk. Miss Brown? Sarah raised her head quickly and looked in the direction of the voice as soon as she heard her last name being called. Glad to know you've decided to join us, said the principal, making Sarah's face turn red. Okay, well, I mean, we've all been there, right? We've all texted in class, or I guess in this case, she's reading a book. I got my first cell phone in 8th grade, and it was one of those flip phones that definitely didn't have any apps on it, but you can bet I was texting on the first day. How about you guys? When Sarah saw Mr. Anderson for the first time, standing next to the principal in a white slim shirt and his hair pulled back, she thought she had him figured out. She didn't know why, but she had a certain feeling that he would be the kind of teacher students feel confident around. He seemed easygoing, almost too young to be a middle school teacher, at least in comparison with the other teachers. His hands were in his pockets, and his posture stated that he didn't have a care in the world. Sarah studied him for a second, and when she looked up to his face, he was looking at her. Oh, what the heck? A little awkward. He remained serious for an instant, and then he gave her a small smile. Sarah felt that smile as if it meant something else, something she couldn't see, but she decided it wasn't important. Oh, damn, dude, like, she didn't even misinterpret. She felt creeped out straight away on the first smile. Usually when I read these kinds of stories, the girls are typically a little bit more, naive, and they're like, oh, he smiled at me, he's cute, yeah, that's great, I'm sure nothing bad's gonna happen. I guess people just aren't having it anymore. Weeks went by, and Sarah's first impression of Mr. Anderson turned out to be right. General consensus was that his classes were the best out of all. Students talked regularly to him out of class, and many talked about him as well. He was understanding and knew how to make himself comfortable around students. Sarah found herself watching him a lot, during class and out of class. She would stare at his hair and his wide smile. He had broad shoulders, and he stood tall as if he owned the place. She found herself respecting him. What the Dude, I thought she was already creeped out by him. Turns out she sounds like she's into him. You know what, Sarah? I'm taking my tiny claps back. He was smart and seemed to have everything under control all the time. Sometimes she even caught him staring back at her. I knew it. Sometimes only for a split second. Sometimes longer. Told you so. She didn't know what it meant either, but she decided to let it go. One day, Sarah was asked by Mr. Anderson to stay a few minutes after class. She thought it was kind of strange. He never asked her that before. She picked up her things slower than usual and waited for her classmates to exit the room. When there was no one left, she approached Mr. Anderson, who was waiting for her in front of his desk. Hey, I noticed you haven't turned in your paper yet. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me? He said, and Sarah made her best not to show that she was confused. The paper wasn't due for another 5 days, and actually, she had almost finished it. Not really. I just haven't written the conclusion yet, she answered, giving him a small smile. That's great. Just let me know if you need help with anything. Sarah nodded. He took a few steps toward her as he smiled, and placed a hand on her lower back as he gestured towards the door. The hand on her back didn't feel friendly to her at all. Instead, it sent a shiver up her spine. That's messed up, man. Like, if you're a teacher, don't ever touch a student around the waist area. That's what is wrong with you? And if you're a student, don't ever let a teacher touch you around the waist area, okay? That's your private part, stay out. After that day, Mr. Anderson would ask Sarah to stay after class regularly. Sometimes he asked her about homework, other times about the class. But some days, he just made conversation with her. With every time, Sarah started to feel more confused by it. The way he placed his hands on her back, or how he always found a way to touch her, made her feel more uncomfortable than she originally thought. She told herself not to make a big deal about it, but she was starting to avoid him. She avoided looking at him in the eye or standing too close to him. Okay, Sarah, I'm giving you back my tiny claps. One day, Mr. Anderson announced to the class that the next paper they had to write would count for around 30% of their grade. After class was over, he asked her to stay once again, and again, she did. Ugh. Hey, Sarah. "I'm worried about your last few notes," he said when they were alone. She didn't understand why he took a special kind of attention towards her. "I was thinking you could use some extra help after class. I could help you." Sarah didn't know why, but she felt like saying no was too rude. What? Too rude? Excuse me. Too rude? Are you serious? My point is, guys, if you're ever in a situation where you find yourself uncomfortable with another person to the point where you almost feel kind of threatened, then never feel like you shouldn't speak up about it. You always should, because you need to protect yourself. If you feel threatened, you should not keep quiet about it. So, Thursday afternoon, Sarah met Mr. Anderson in his classroom when school was over. She felt a little nervous walking in, knowing they'd be alone. She didn't like the idea of it, and she made sure to sit across from him, keeping her hands away from his. He smiled at her once in a while, and she never once liked that smile, although she smiled back, trying to keep appearances. She was writing on her notebook the things he explained to her when he reached out and grabbed her hand. His thumb moved up and down while he spoke to her, and to Sarah, it felt like burning. So basically, she had her hand out and he grabbed it and he was like doing this kind of motion. Dude, you don't do that to a student. As a former English teacher, this is just appalling. Mr. Anderson stood up when they were finished, and while Sarah was putting her things inside her bag, he stood next to her, way too close. She felt her heart pounding inside her chest, self-conscious about every movement she made. She decided that she couldn't take it anymore when she felt his hand on her shoulder. She stood up quickly, gave him a quick, "Thank you, goodbye," and stepped outside the classroom. The next morning, she couldn't quite understand where this sudden strength was coming from, but she didn't care. She was tired of feeling guilty, confused, or simply uncomfortable. She had had enough. More tiny claps for Sarah. She stepped inside the principal's office and told them everything about Mr. Anderson, and she left nothing inside her chest. When she was done, she felt more relieved than ever. The principal listened and promised they would deal with it. Sarah didn't want to believe the principal because she might end up with her hopes up and maybe nothing would happen. But when they announced that Mr. Anderson would no longer work at the school, Sarah almost cried out of relief. Apparently, a couple of other girls had a similar experience with the teacher, and the school could no longer tolerate it anymore. Whoever they were, Sarah was infinitely grateful to them for being a little braver than she was. And that is the end of the story. Holy dude! Okay, well, first of all, that little comment that she wrote at the end of the story, Sarah, listen, you don't ever have to say that they are, braver than you. You are just as brave for standing up and speaking out. As I said at the beginning of the story, guys, when you're in a position like this, you need to speak out, okay? If you feel threatened, if you feel uncomfortable, if somebody is doing something and you're pretty darn sure that it's wrong, okay, you need to tell somebody, especially if it's a person in power, like power over you, like a teacher, a counselor, I don't know, your boss. I'm really glad that Sarah ended up, coming out of this whole thing. I'm glad she got the courage, most importantly, to, tell somebody about this, the principal. And even though Mr. Anderson got fired, even if he was fired, but she never told on him, I wouldn't feel as good as if she had told the principal and maybe he wasn't fired, but like at least in trouble and never did it again. Because at least that way she would have built up the strength and maybe she could use that strength to do something in the further to defend herself, and maybe then he would get fired. But I think the important thing is that she got the courage to do it in the first place. I'm also happy he got fired. I'm just saying, I'm happy he got fired. I'm not saying I'm not happy he got fired. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that sub button because I upload videos every week. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, otherwise I will send Max to your house and he will chew on you. Seriously, do you want this little guy to chew on you? I don't think so, okay? Look at how vicious this guy is. Look at this guy. Look at that. Okay? Vicious little guy. You don't want to mess with him. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Good night. Listen, I was just talking to Max about my background, and obviously I need to add something to it. I have some acoustic panels that I was going to put up on the wall, kind of similar to my first YouTube background I had. You guys remember that one, right? So I was thinking about putting some of those acoustic panels behind me and then getting another one of these curtain and put them here. And I'm gonna like even this curtain out, make them both flat together. This is an extra curtain right here that I'm gonna put here actually. And once I put the curtains up, put the acoustic panels here, maybe like I'll put like, I don't know, some kind of like changing light array here, and then another one on this side. I don't know, I mean, like I always wanted an aesthetic look, but I never had one in any of my studio setups. So I don't know, I just wanted to ask you guys, what do you guys think for my background? What should I do? You know, if I'm feeling really lazy, I could just put a curtain, an entire curtain, like one of those long like studio, stage curtains, like one of those. I know some YouTubers or streamers are literally just use like a huge ass curtain, but I feel like that's a little too bland for me. I don't know, let me know if you care at all or don't care. I mean, like, I know the background, I know, okay, it looks unfinished. Anyways, as I said, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to sub, hit that like button, and I will see you guys in the next video. Good night.